Hey, thank you for joining. I've got the pleasure today of introducing Kris Erickson, who is a co-founder and partner at Workforce Science Associates. Kris has over 20 years of experience in the human resource and human capital space, is an accomplished author and presenter, and has had previous executive roles at Connexa, IBM, Gallup, and other companies as well. And today we're going to go into more detail about SHRM's recommended approach to measuring and improving employee engagement. And so, Kris, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Cameron. Welcome, everyone. As Cameron said, we are going to focus today on SHRM's solution that is focused on employee engagement. And I think just to kind of set the stage, what you're seeing, what you're seeing on the screen is a medical device company's production floor. And several years ago, I was presenting results. So the survey had been launched, the results came in, and we were telling the story behind the numbers to the entire executive suite. And in the middle of our presentation, the CEO got a phone call and he abruptly walked out of the meeting and never returned. And so for any of you who've been in front of senior executives, when that happens, you immediately think to yourself, uh-oh, what did I do wrong? Did I say something that offended him? And so afterwards, I went to their CHRO and asked that question. Did we say something that offended your CEO? And she said, oh no, that's not the case at all. He just received a phone call about the largest recall in the history of the company with a certain product. And so out of sheer curiosity, I asked her what division the recall was in. And I went back and looked at the data. And we were fortunate enough that this was our third year of doing their annual census survey. And when I looked at the division that had the product recall, they had the lowest scores on engagement in the entire company for 3 years running. And so when you think about that, we could have predicted that something to the magnitude of a product recall would happen. And so that's really why, as we think about the agenda today, that employee engagement isn't just the right thing to do for employees, it's really important for business. And so we're going to walk through SHRM's engagement survey content. It's built on a high performance model. And then we're really going to also speak to what happens once the data comes in. What can you expect in terms of understanding what that story is? As a reminder, the survey content for SHRM is built upon WSA's 3-year world norms database. And as you can see, it is now the years of 2022, 23, and 24. And the depth and breadth of the data that we've collected really helps us understand what is really going on in the hearts and minds of employees. This is also the database that we provide norms based upon industry, based upon job levels. So most any way that you will want to compare your company's results to competitors, we're pretty confident that we can be able to help you with that. So this is the framework that the SHRM survey is built from. So let's start at the very left-hand side. We all know this. It starts with leadership. And in times of uncertainty like what we have endured in the past 5 years, employees are looking to the senior most levels of leadership in the organization. They're looking to the person they directly report to for support, guidance, and assistance. And so we just know that it's critical, and the database would support this, that we have to be able to measure how are people feeling about leadership from the boardroom to the front line. But what we also know is that leaders then need to create environments that allow and afford for employees to A, have a great experience at work, but B, affords and allows them to give their best work. And so that psychological ownership really is at the heart of the SHRM census survey. It is about engagement. And in its simplest terms, engagement is, do I want to give my best work? Not just come in, not just phone it in, but actually be motivated, committed, and conscientious in my work. But what we've also learned by studying high performing organizations that consistently perform is that there has to be a really well run and oiled machine that allows individuals, allows employees to give their best work. And so that really is that operational excellence. And it is about resources, it's about collaboration, it's about support. And when those three kind of critical anchors are measured and are firing on all cylinders, it's interesting what begins to happen. And you look at those behavioral outcomes. If I can give my best work, which is operational excellence, and I want to give my best work, suddenly I'm more productive. The quality of my work goes up. Customers believe that they're getting better service. I want to stay and grow in the organization. And when we can see those metrics consistently moving in the right direction, then the organization performs more efficiently and more effectively. Revenues go up, profit goes up, market share goes up, as well as kind of that overall brand awareness. And that ultimately is the goal, because when business outcomes are consistently hitting targets or outperforming targets, then that really helps the organization say, we can continue to learn and grow. We can create more programs that support employees' overall engagement. We can do more innovation for our customers and our employees. And so if that is kind of the framework, then what you see on the screen are the 6 tenets of the employer-employee relationship. And we've studied this now for decades, and we just know that these tend to always bubble up to the top out of that database in terms of what is just mission critical for the employee experience. And what you see under trust in leadership and strategic alignment, these are the actual items that bubbled up under each of those 2 critical tenets. And these are in the content of the SHRM annual census survey. So let's think about trust in leadership and strategic alignment. That sits squarely on the shoulders of the senior leaders in the organization. And what we've learned out of our refreshed database is that these 2 tenets are more important in the environment in which employees operate than they ever have been before. And what employees are saying is, I want to know where we're headed. I want to know why we're headed in that direction. And then I want to know what's in it for me. And that's all around that strategic alignment. What's also important to note under strategic alignment is that for the first time, change management is something that employees are looking to senior leadership to be very adept at being able to do. And so I think that's, again, an outcropping of what we've just seen over the past 5 years. And they want senior leaders to walk the talk. If we talk about values, if we talk about culture, they're expecting the senior leaders to be the culture bearers there and model those behaviors. As we think about trust in leadership, this is about 3 critical components. Number 1, do I just think you're competent to do your job, right? Number 2, do you do it in a way that is ethical? Can I trust that you are doing business in the right way? But then a new one that surfaced to the top again out of our updated database was the benevolence item. Employees want to know that you, senior leaders, know that you can't do this without us, and that you do care about our overall experience. And so those 2 are at the very foundation of the SHRM engagement survey. But then as we look at communication and feeling valued, what we've learned is that that sits on the shoulders of anyone who leads a team in the organization. This is about being able to be good translators from senior leadership down to my team, my employees, but also being the megaphone on up the food chain. What are my people saying? How are they feeling? What are they experiencing? And how can we help senior leaders understand that? And that really is that communication tenet. And then feeling valued, this is about, do I matter? Do I feel that my time, my talents, my skills, my abilities are valued in the organization? And again, that really is sitting on the shoulders of people who lead any size of team. Are you catching people doing things right? And then lastly, as we think about that high performance model and that operational excellence component, it is about feeling supported. And this is about really focusing in on, do I feel a part of something that is bigger and larger than myself? Do I feel that the person I directly report to really cares not just about whether I show up to work every day, wherever that may be, but do you care about me as a person? And then as well, just overall support as we continue to navigate these uncharted, uncertain times of change. People really want to know that they're not in this alone. And then probably the most important tenet out of our refresh database is growth and development. The number one predictor of employee engagement around the globe is the first item that you see under growth and development. I feel that my career goals can be met at this company. And as you examine that item and try to unpack it, what it's really saying is we want managers and leaders to have that conversation with their employees. For some employees, they want to climb that proverbial ladder. They want to be a vice president one day. They want to be a CEO. Well, how do you help them chart that path? For others, it simply may be, I want to grow in my depth and breadth of experience. I want to become an even better subject matter expert. And so that again really is that affects every single employee in the organization. And when people are highly engaged, we just know that growth and development tends to be a top predictor of engagement. Because if I am bought in to working at this organization, I logically am going to want to know, what does that mean for my future? So as you think about these 6 tenets, as I said, this is the core of the SHRM engagement survey, and these items are represented. We call it the core 33. And so again, really quick to administer, only 33 items. And by the way, as a side note, if you're all wondering, how did SHRM and WSA begin this partnership? Well, back in 2020, SHRM internally was actually our client, and we used these 6 tenets and this set of core 33 items to run their annual census survey. And at the end, the consensus from the senior leadership team was that this was really insightful and impactful, and it really seemed to resonate at all levels of the organization. And so from that, we began discussions about, could this be an offering that SHRM could provide to any member, any organization? And in the summer of 2021, this actually became an offering that SHRM provides. And our role in it is to basically run the project and then be able to tell the story behind the numbers when the data comes in. And the way that we tell the story behind the numbers is with our action model. First and foremost, what we'll say is we just need to understand the data. And the way that we understand the data is that we really focus in on what is most important to moving that lever of engagement. And what we've just known is that you have to have some kind of science behind it, right? So we use a correlation analysis that helps us to know what items in the survey have the strongest relationship to engagement. And if you pick 1 or 2 of those items that have that strong relationship, and you, number 1, understand what that means in your organization. Number 2, you have conversations with the people on your team about what you learned is most critical in their overall experience. And then you act upon 1 or 2 of those most important items and commit to following through, you will have a higher probability of not only improving in those areas that you've focused in on and action planned on, but you have a much higher probability that you're going to move the needle on engagement. And so what does that look like? What is the best practice? When we have gone in and we have studied organizations that have made positive, sustained momentum on engagement over time. They've really said it's leadership at all levels in the organization. This isn't an HR initiative. Yes, we as HR professionals definitely are the ones who drive the action in terms of the survey itself. But it really, when the results come in, it really sits squarely in the lap of every single person who leads a team. And so what we provide in the SHRM engagement solution is what you see in that first box. Once the data comes in, our consultant will pore over that data and then really meet with the senior leadership team and talk about, here are the areas that seem to bubble up to the top in terms of what is most important. And almost always what we know with senior leaders is what we talked about earlier, which is leadership trust and strategic alignment. Those almost always bubble up to the top in terms of what employees want from senior leaders. And what we'll say there is, you just pick one or two items that leaders are going to say to the entire organization. This is what we are committed to doing over the next 12 months. And once senior leaders have understood the data and they're committed to their action plan, then it starts to just cascade down. Then it goes to the next level in your organization. For some of you, that's business units. For some of you, that's just middle management. For some of you, it's VPs. But this is the group that really has a mission critical or linchpin role in terms of action planning, because they need to take what senior leaders have said and be able to translate and communicate that to those individuals in their downlines so that they can understand what it is that they need to be doing in order to bring those action plans to light. And so I think about this group as they are the translators. They have to be the ones who make this personable and make it real in the context of what their teams do for the organization. And then lastly, it is frontline leaders. These are the people that are on the manufacturing floor. They're in the quick serve restaurant. They're behind the hotel desk. These are the ones who are watching employees in action. And so they need to be able to feel supported in their ability to, again, keep it crayon simple, pick one area that's really, really important to their people, and then follow through. Have those conversations, have that feedback meeting, commit to an action plan, and then commit to constantly reinforcing the progress or lack thereof that is being made. And so that really is, in a nutshell, what the SHRM engagement survey is. It's not only a model, but that model then has very specific content, 33 items. And then post-survey, it really is, how do we help senior leaders get the ball rolling in terms of what's most important to the organization? What are those one or two areas that they're going to commit to action on? And then how do we then help guide those middle managers, those BU leaders, and how do we help equip those frontline leaders? And so before I take questions, I do just kind of want to end with, we started out with a story of what happens when engagement isn't where it should be and what can that do to business, to a really great example of when an organization gets it right. So several years ago, I was on a Delta flight en route to Orlando, Florida. And as I was working away, and the rest of the plane was boarding, this little girl came walking up, and you see her there on the screen. And she said to her grandparents that were a row up and over from me, Grandma and Grandpa, I want to sit with you. And her parents said, you know what, let's just get seated. When the plane takes off, we'll let you come back up and sit with Grandma and Grandpa. And I thought, well, that's kind of sweet. And so sure enough, about 20 minutes into the flight, I hear the little patter of feet coming up the aisle, and it was this girl. And I thought, well, she's going to have a great flight with her grandparents. And I went back to just working away on my laptop. Well, as they were getting ready to do the beverage service, I just happened to look up. And this little girl was helping these three flight attendants put the cups and the napkins on the beverage cart. And I thought, well, that's again pretty cool. So again, went back to working away. Well, the next time I looked up, they had created what you see on her head. It is a Biscoff cookie crown. Now, I have no idea how at 32,000 feet they were able to find tape, and even think about, creating a crown. And some of you may be thinking to yourself, why in the world um, would they create a crown for her? Well, remember, I was bound for Orlando. If you look at the t-shirt the little girl is wearing, it's Minnie Mouse. And so I couldn't take it any longer. I jumped up with my phone and I walked up and I said, "Can I take your photo?" Because in my head I was thinking, this is engagement at 32,000 feet in the air. And they said, of course. And so as I sat back down, I thought to myself, okay, why did they do this? And when they finally came to my aisle for the beverage service, I asked, and they said, well, she told us that she's super excited. They're going to Walt Disney World and that she gets to meet Cinderella, and she's always wanted to be Cinderella. So we thought we would just start her off on her vacation with a crown to match Cinderella's. And again, I thought that's an amazing experience, not only for the little girl, but her entire family. And what you need to know is that individually, those three flight attendants came up to me and said, if I give you my personal email, will you send me that picture? And I said, absolutely. So what does this mean, right? It was a great experience for the family. I also know this, that they told that story, and they might still be telling that story to their friends, their family, their coworkers. And I promise you, the next time that they were going to fly somewhere, Delta was the airline of choice. I also think about those flight attendants, and I can promise you that nowhere in a Delta flight attendant manual is there a standard operating procedure for creating a Biscoff cookie crown. That is engagement at its finest. They were excited to give her a great experience. It was innovative, as they're flying through the air. Well, at the end of the day, what we know is when employees can feel empowered to give their best work, that's when you do begin to see things like we talked about in the beginning with that high performance model. We do see that customer service goes up, and we do see the impact of that customer service in overall revenue, bottom line, income. And so as I started out in the very beginning, engagement isn't just the right thing to do because we need to listen to our employees. It's really important to business as well. And so with that, I just want to leave you with, if you do want to have more information about the offering of the SHRM engagement survey, you can scan that QR code. If you want to get in touch with us, you can simply go to info@workforcescience.com. But what you see on the top of the screen is what can you expect from the SHRM engagement survey? It is about helping you. We will support you throughout the entire project, as well as help guide and steer what needs to be focused in on to have the most impact on your employees. You will get actionable insights. We do have robust, relevant benchmarks so that you can know how is your organization performing against others that you may compete for talent with. And then obviously you'll get that guided action planning where we will talk about here one or two things that we think are most important and how we think you could achieve that. And you'll have access to our consultants who definitely will provide best practices. So with that, I will conclude and just see if there are any questions.
Hi, Chris. It's Cameron again. So I don't see any questions in the chat. There's still a minute or two if anybody has a question and wants to enter it. But I had a question for you as we wrap up here, and that's for those who are thinking about either restarting an engagement program or starting one from scratch and they haven't done one for a while. What are some of the best suggestions you could give for trying to get leadership buy-in to re-energizing, starting a new engagement or listening program?
Thanks, Cam. I think probably for executives, especially in the times that we're in now where purse strings are very tight, it is making that connection with the foundation of the SHRM engagement survey, which is that high performance model, that this isn't a soft metric. Engagement is a hard metric, and it does have very clear implications to what senior executives care most about, which is driving that overall revenue, driving bottom line, profitability. And so if there's any way that you can connect engagement to things like improved retention of employees, improved productivity of employees. That's the language that senior leaders definitely speak and think about. And so it's moving and changing their minds that this really is a hard metric. It's not just something that we do because we should be doing it. It's because it's really important to driving overall business outcomes. And I can say that with confidence because oftentimes, leaders will say to me, well, if we're performing really well, then of course our people are going to be more engaged. If we're struggling, then of course our people are going to be struggling. And what we've really been able to uncover in this latest refreshed database is that engagement is a predictor of business outcomes. And so if that's something that anyone on the webinar today would like to know more about, reach out to us because we can actually share some of those critical metrics.
Thank you, Kris. I appreciate that. And thanks everyone for joining. As Kris mentioned, our next session will be on dashboard best practices. So creating dashboards that highlight the what's important versus maybe what's interesting. And that will be coming on August 20th. So set your calendars, look for an update on that with more information, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.